Did you get a call from that lady from the Boxer Rescue?
I didn't get a call. Well, I might have. I didn't. There's some numbers I didn't recognize,
Yeah.
but she didn't leave a message.
Oh,
I
yeah.
just got the email.
I know I talked to her for quite a while, and she talked to Tim and Tyler. She told me Tyler said, Tyler to her, we don't consider you a real business.
Mr. Chair, we are live. Are you ready? Okay.
Good morning, everyone. At this time, I'll call the Crow Wing County Regular Board Meeting for January 26, 2021 to order. If you'll stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you and welcome. At this time, is there anyone who would like to speak to an issue that is not on our current agenda?
Mr. Chair, do you want to do roll since we have a virtual commissioner?
Very good. Let's do a roll call.
Commissioner Brecken?
Here.
Commissioner Barrows?
Here.
Commissioner Hoag?
Here.
Commissioner Franzine? Here. Commissioner Coring?
Here.
Everyone's present.
All right. Another call for anyone who would like to speak on an item that is not on our current agenda. Last call for anyone who would like to speak on an item not on our current agenda. Hearing none, we'll move on to the review and approve of the minutes from January 5th, 21, the statutory, organizational, and regular county board meeting minutes, and January 19th, 2021, special county board meeting minutes.
Motion to approve.
Motion by Commissioner Franzine to approve.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Hoag. Therese, if you would call the roll call, please.
Commissioner Brecken?
Yes.
Commissioner Hoag?
Right.
Commissioner Franzine?
Aye.
Commissioner Coring?
Yes.
Commissioner Barrows?
Chair votes yes. Motion passes. Look for a motion, or is there any additional items for our agenda today before I take a vote on that?
Motion to approve.
Motion by Commissioner Franzine to approve the agenda.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Hoag. Therese, if you would call the roll call, please.
Commissioner Hoag?
Aye.
Commissioner Franzine?
Aye.
Commissioner Coring?
Yes.
Commissioner Brecken?
Aye.
Commissioner Barrows?
Chair votes aye. Motion passes. Consent agenda. Any concerns with the consent agenda? If not, I would
Mr.
look for a
Chairman?
motion. Excuse me, Commissioner Coring?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I've got a couple of questions if you want, either now or before or when you get a motion. It's up to you.
Why don't you ask them now? That'll be fine.
Okay, thank you. And I think I know the answer to these anyway, but 5.3, the designating of the depositories, is that something that we do yearly, or are we changing somebody's name on conducting bank transactions?
It's my understanding we're not changing names and that we do this yearly and we are utilizing the same institutions that we have in the past.
Okay, and that answers that question. And then I don't know that we discussed, and I know what this is, and everybody knows that I'm not a big fan of letters of support. Doesn't matter who they are, I'm not picking on them, but if somebody could just explain to me 514, the letter of support for Minnesota Teen Challenge, what it is and why we're doing it, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
We have a couple people online, Commissioner. Micah Nevrick and Tracy Anderson from the Teen Challenge Group, if they would like to speak to the Commissioner's concerns.
And actually, Mr. Chair, I will kick us off. This is Kara, Director for Community Services. So we have had the opportunity to work with Minnesota Adult and Teen Challenge, as well as the Know the Truth Prevention Program. They have approached us for a letter of support for some upcoming grants that they would like to apply for. And while I know that not everyone is a fan of letters of support, we really value this partnership and would like to pursue this. However, trust in your good judgment as to whether you approve this or not. In addition, we, as you know, we presented on Blade, gosh, a week or two ago, maybe last week, and how we're working with the Know the Truth group to bring some education to our youth in the community related to substance misuse and making good choices. And so this letter of support is sort of in line with that, in that we're helping them to, or we're supporting them in the application of funding for some upcoming projects. Tracy, do you have anything you want to add?
No, I think you said it well, Kara. Unless anybody has any more questions about our Know the Truth Prevention Program, I could provide a little bit more of a background, but I think you set it up really well.
Kara, just a question, and then I think I'll be, satisfied with this. I guess what concerns me, if I want to make sure that there isn't another group out there that's providing these services, and that we have county government picking one over another. Somebody else is going to come forward and say, hey, wait a minute, we provide those services. We might go and apply for those grants. That's not going to happen, is it?
Very good question, sir, and thank you for reminding me. I was going to bring that up. We have not heard from any other organization requesting a letter of support to apply for these grants at this time.
Okay. I think that answers that question. And then just one other question, Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, just let me, I wrote this down. Appointment to the Crow Wing County Community Corrections Advisory Board. Are you appointing somebody? Can I just have an explanation on that? I guess and the reason why usually I don't have a whole lot of questions, but I don't remember us talking about this stuff. And if we talk about it ahead of time, I don't usually ask any questions. So 5.15, can somebody explain that?
Thank you, Commissioner. Administrator Houle, since I'm new in this position and some of these appointments, I have to ask you a chair appointment, or is this a board appointment?
Mr. Chair, I believe it's a chair appointment. We had Corky McQuiston, who you may recall was the Brainerd Police Chief, and he was serving as the law enforcement representative on the Community Corrections Advisory Board, but he's retiring. And so the request here is to appoint Andy Rooney, who is the current Crosby Chief of Police, to serve in that capacity on the advisory committee. If you certainly could have any law enforcement person do it to bring that law enforcement perspective. So I'm not sure about Kara, if you have any background information about how we settled on Mr. Rooney.
Thank you, County Administrator, Mr. Chair, board members. Corky submitted his letter of resignation to us because of his retirement, and made the suggestion that Chief Rooney would be a valuable asset to our group. So we were able to reach out to Chief Rooney in a very short amount of time. He agreed to participate in the committee, and that's pretty simplistically how we landed on Chief Rooney being a part of the committee.
So, Kara, if you could just answer a question for me, why doesn't this appear on our other list of appointments that we make that we'll be addressing later? So it could, rather than be on the consent agenda, be part of the overall appointments that we make from the chair or the board.
I am not sure on that.
Administrator Houle is shaking his head. It could be in either place, so I just wanted some clarification on that. It just seems like it would fit better with the other appointments that we make. Commissioner Coring, any other questions?
Well, I just, as long as you're okay with that appointment, you're the chairman and you're the one that's making that, you know, I mean, we're adopting this in the consent agenda, but really in essence, that's your decision. So if you're okay with it, I'm okay with it.
And on this
I've got
round,
no other
I'm okay
questions.
with that. Next time, perhaps we'll just have it placed on, if there is another time in my lifetime, have it placed under the regular appointments that we do, aside from the consent agenda. So anything else concerning the consent agenda items? I would look for a motion to approve.
So move.
Commissioner Hoag makes a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Commissioner Brecken seconds the motion. Therese, if you would call the roll, please.
Commissioner Franzine?
Aye.
Commissioner Coring?
Aye.
Commissioner Brecken?
Aye.
Commissioner Hoag?
Aye.
Commissioner Barros?
Chair votes aye, motion passes. Item number 6 today is Land Services. 6.1, approve the setting of a public hearing date for amending the ATV ordinance. Mr.
Yes, good morning,
Free.
Mr. Chair. Oops, excuse me. Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the board. So I have quite a few details in the RBA on this item. The county
can
board
just stop you
first
for a
passed
second.
ATV ordinance.
Ryan, if I can stop you
Oh,
for a
yep.
second. I recognize the wrong person to speak on the subject, and I want to acknowledge my misspeaking. So, Mr. Simonson, you're ready to go. I originally had
Thank
Jake
you,
on
Mr.
there to
Chair.
do it, but my mistake.
No problem, thank you. Back in 2008, the county board first passed an ATV ordinance, and the ordinance restricted ATVs from operating in the ditch on the segment of County Road 66 between Cross Lake and Manhattan Beach. And that's because that ditch section is a unique stormwater system for the Whitefish chain. All that runoff in that ditch goes into the Whitefish chain, and ATVs can cause erosion. And so it made sense to restrict ATVs from that ditch. We made a couple of updates to the ATV ordinance since then. One of the big ones is allowing Class 1 ATVs to operate up on the shoulder of all county roads back in 2018. When we made that most recent update, it was an oversight on our part, and we forgot to keep that restriction to eliminate ATVs from the ditch on County Road 66 on that segment. And so the proposal here today is today it's just to set a public hearing date in the future before we make any amendments to this ordinance, but the amendment proposal would be to simply re-add that restriction so that ATVs can no longer operate in the ditch on just that segment.
We lost your voice,
Mr.
Ryan.
Chair.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
I can now.
I'm not sure where I cut off, but the proposal here today is just to set a public hearing date before we make in order to consider amending the ATV ordinance to restrict ATVs from operating in the ditch on County Road 66 between Cross Lake and Manhattan Beach.
So Ryan, do you
Mr.
have a
Chair.
suggestion on a date?
23rd.
I think I have February 23rd in the RBA.
Sorry.
And the ordinance is attached in the packet with the green highlighted item is the only proposed change.
Any questions for Ryan concerning that? Commissioner Coring, any questions?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I guess really the only question, I guess, is before us is whether or not to set a public hearing, but I do have another question is the only reason we're setting this public hearing is to make this one change. We're not opening this up to make a whole bunch of changes to the ordinance, are we?
Commissioner Coring, correct. It's just for the one change, and anytime, whether passing or amending an ordinance, a public hearing is required. So it's,
Correct.
yeah, just for the one change.
But I just want to make sure that we're not opening it up for, like we're doing with planning and zoning making a whole bunch of changes. This is the only change that you're planning on making, correct?
Exactly. This is it. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
So with that, I would look for a motion to authorize the county administrator to set a date for a public hearing to be held on February 23rd, 2021, to further allow the public to comment on the proposed amendment to ordinance number 0601.
Mr. Chair, I would so move.
Commissioner Brecken makes the motion to approve. Commissioner Franzine seconds that motion. Therese, if you would call the roll call, please.
Commissioner Coring,
Aye.
Commissioner Brecken,
Aye.
Commissioner Hoag,
Aye.
Commissioner Franzine,
Aye.
Commissioner Barrows,
Chair votes aye. Motion passes. 6.2, Crow Wing County Soil Water Conservation District Memorandum of Understanding. I believe Melissa Barrick, are you online to address this one?
Well, Mr. Chair, this is Jake Free, Environmental Services Supervisor. I'm going to present this one, but Melissa will be probably chiming in as well, if that's appropriate.
Go ahead.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Very, very pleased to present today the final report for a process we've been working through with our partners and other agencies. As stated earlier, we're looking for board action to authorize myself, the Environmental Services Supervisor, to sign a memorandum of understanding between Crow Wing County and the Crow Wing Soil and Water Conservation District on behalf of the county. So this is an item of discussion that's been going on since 2018. So beginning in that year, the Minnesota Board of Water and Soil Resources, or BOWSR, they conducted a performance review and assessment process. Folks will call that a PRAP, of both Crow Wing County and Crow Wing SWCD as it relates to their administration and implementation of water planning activities and meeting those water planning goals, and our administration of the Wetland Conservation Act. And as a result of that PRAP process, that assessment of how we do things, one of those joint recommendations was number 3 on that report, which was we were to conduct a strategic assessment of organizational capacity of the Land Services Department and SWCD to determine the appropriate division of responsibility for funding for programs such as local water planning and the Wetland Conservation Act. And so as a result of that recommendation, we did just that. We hired and contracted with Region 5, both SWCD and the county, to facilitate a series of joint meetings in 2019 and 2020. We included key stakeholders of how both of our organizations can work better together to optimize stewardship of our public resources. The results of those meetings resulted in a final report, which you have included in your packet, and there were 4 outcomes identified as part of that as well, again, in the packet. Outcome number 4 was a memorandum of understanding. That's been drafted and reviewed by both of our office agencies, Soil and Water and Crow Wing County, and it's been reviewed by our county attorney's office. We've had a preliminary discussion on the MOU and the strategic assessment process pretty recently, as you might recall, on December 22nd of 2020. And there was some discussion that occurred there as well. This, I think importantly, I want to note that this MOU includes up to a $5,000 payment to the Soil and Water Conservation District for services identified in attachment 1 of that MOU in 2021. I also want to note that we do have a couple of our partners. There may be more, but I know at least we do have Chris Pence, who is a board conservationist with the Minnesota Board of Water and Soil Resources, and Melissa Barrick, who's the Crow Wing SWCD district manager. And so with that, Mr. Chair and members of the board, we'll take any questions you might have about any of this process or the MOU, or we'd be looking to have some board action today. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Jake? Commissioner Coring, any questions?
Mr. Question, Mr. Chairman, no questions. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, maybe Melissa could make a statement too?
Melissa,
Soil and Water?
would you like to speak to this?
Sure, I can speak to this. I also just want to recognize Joanne Weaver is also on this call from the Soil and Water Conservation District. Diane Jacobson was the one that was a part of that committee, as well as Commissioner Brecken, but Joanne has sit in for Diane for a couple of these meetings. I guess I just want to say thank you to the county. I think it was a really great process that we went through, and I think that the outcomes in this report indicate kind of the success of this process. So,
All right. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I guess I would like to also recognize this group working it. I had the opportunity to be able to work on this process with them, and again, Region 5 facilitating it. This is really adding a value add to the county. I think that I see the relationship that Soil and Water has with our highway department and the way that they're working together. This opens up the door now, so I think we'll have a better working relationship so that we're looking at the big picture and what their contribution can be working with our Land Services Department. So with that, I'd be also open to making a motion to accept the Memorandum of Understanding.
Commissioner Brecken makes a motion to approve the MOU.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Hoag. Therese, if you would call the roll call, please.
Commissioner Brecken?
Aye.
Commissioner Hoag?
Aye.
Commissioner Franzine?
Aye.
Commissioner Coring?
Aye.
Commissioner Barrows?
Chair votes aye. Motion passes. With that,
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
County Sheriff, Mr. Goddard. Sheriff Goddard, I apologize.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. Just to bring you up to date and kind of some fun facts that we came across. We have a number of annual reports that we have to turn in, and one of them has to do with our drones. So how many times we use the drones and kind of what the calls were. John Bowen, our Emergency Management Director, is in charge of the drone program. And keep in mind, this is a volunteer group that we have with area fire departments and law enforcement, personnel from the jail as our pilots. But I wanted to highlight that today. So John's got the information, and I was surprised at how many calls we actually had this last year. I am on the page group, when the call-outs come in, and it surprised me how many that we did have. So with that, I'll turn it over to John and have him fill you in with that. It's a pretty unique report, so thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, John.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Board of Commissioners. Like the Sheriff said, given 2020, it's kind of the weird year it was, we did have quite a few call-outs. We were just over 30 call-outs, and we're actually required to report that annually now, starting this past 2020 to the BCA the first month of January. So here's some of the calls that we kind of went through, starting in January of last year, 2020. Anywhere from crash recons, we had ATVs that went through the ice, we called our team out. Agency assists, fires, search warrants, or maybe we had a burglary in progress. We had multiple, actually, I think we had up to 4 missing children last year that we got called out for. A 3-year-old, a couple of 11-year-olds. We also had a missing adult that possibly had Alzheimer's. That was another one of our call-outs. Fires, sometimes I talked even a fleeing subject, stolen vehicle. I think I talked about burglary in progress. So we actually had multiple call-outs in 2020. Our team is comprised of 15 pilots, like the Sheriff said, from local police departments, Cross Lake, Brainerd Fire Department. So really we have kind of a whole team that we meet on a regular basis and train and meet. It's been a great resource for us to have for Crow Wing County. I want to thank Sourcewell in the past that helped us fund that program and get it up and running. But it's been really good for Crow Wing County and our neighboring counties. We've had done mutual aids to our neighboring counties as well with our team. Anybody have any questions?
John, a quick question. Do these assist in accident recreation?
Correct. So what we'll do is we'll fly it, and we've worked with the State Patrol with their crash recon people, and they'll actually fly them at the level of, say, those vehicles are down the highway, so they can recreate those crashes, and then we hand that information, those videos and pictures over to the State Patrol or to that law enforcement agency that's doing that investigation.
Has that made a significant difference in recreating that
It's
picture?
it's helped a lot with real-time information, because a lot of times we can get there while the scene is still active or they're cleaning up the scene. So it's a little quicker than waiting for a recon specialist, say from MSP, to come from a couple hours away. So it really speeds up the whole process.
So just tell us, you know, if you're sitting at a car and you're running that drone, what's the distance that it can go out and still be effective?
It depends on, currently right now, we have to have a line of sight at all times. But the current drones we do have, they can fly up to almost 4 miles. But normally with living up in the woods in Crow Wing County, you can't see 4 miles because of all the trees. And we have to have visual line of sight all the time. So.
Mr. Chair, another example too is when we had the fishing contest going on 2 years ago, we flew out of the church just north of there, the really big church. I don't know
Scott,
the name, but,
or Sheriff, can you please come to the mic?
I'm sorry.
I know you have a loud voice, but it doesn't pick up back there very well.
So maybe a good comparison to that is we had the fishing contest, well, we've had it every year for a number of years. And last year, or 2 years ago, we had our home base at the church just north of Hole in the Day Bay there. And we launched from there. So our drone never left that oversight. So basically hovered over their parking lot. And we were able to zoom in with the camera system that we have on our bigger drones. We have 2 bigger drones. We were able to zoom in with our camera system, and we could actually read license plates of vehicles driving around at the contest area. So the high definition camera and the capabilities are amazing. And now imagine, just like anything else with electronics, this is yesterday's news in comparison to what's out there today, because just like any computer, any electronic you're buying, it's basically outdated when you buy it. But the capabilities that we have for infrared, for seeking out a heat signal, and then the viewable capabilities are just amazing. And like John mentioned about flying at line of sight, so imagine if we have a crash on a corner. If you go up high enough, it's very easy to see, well, look, it doesn't seem like there's any obstructions. You've got good line of sight. It seems like it's just a car in the ditch. But if you actually come back and fly it at the level or the height of what a person would be driving that vehicle,
right,
and then drive through that corner, you can see exactly what the driver was seeing, or a very good impression of what the driver was seeing, coming into that corner. And that has proved valuable. And to watch that footage, it's really cool. I mean, our drone pilots are doing an awesome job. And to be able to fly that takes technique. To hover is no big deal. They can just send it up there and let the thing sit there, and we watch the recording. But to actually fly them does take a lot of technique and a lot of training, as John mentioned. And they do a good job of meeting up, training, and it's invaluable. I mean, I've said it before and I say it again. I can see the day truly where we take off for a call, and throughout the entire U.S. there's drones everywhere, and there'll be a little drone that will fly over and tell us what's going on even before we get there. I could see that as someday being in the future of where we're at. I mean, who thought we'd ever have computers in the cars 20, 30 years ago? So the technology is definitely a good benefit for us.
Have you heard of these being utilized in the Line 3 situation?
Yes, actually, in both approaches. So we have had some. We have not. Crow Wing County has not. But in protests that have taken place across the nation, drones have been used really on both sides, if you will, from the protesters' angle and then also from the law enforcement for the oversight. It's something that if we get the request, we will certainly do. But as John mentioned, the rules for us and the statutes continue to change and continue to be in discussion on an annual basis in our legislature. So right now, when and how we can fly is kind of defined on that incident. So oftentimes, it might take some court action to be able to fly. If we're searching for a kid, no, we'll take the thing out with us right now, and we'll launch all 4 drones if we're able to. But depending on the circumstances involved with it, sometimes it does take court action to be able to fly.
Why would that be?
It's really just, it's making sure that we're accountable. The conversation, when we first started the drone conversation here in Crow Wing County, a number of people that had concerns were kind of that big brother. You know, are we going to be just flying over people's yards and spying on them? And it's kind of making sure that we're correctly regulating those type of issues. Because it's all good work until someone does something, wrong, and then all of a sudden everyone's accountable for that. And I think we've done a good job. I've worked with our area representatives here the last couple of years when this topic has come up down at the state legislature of what we think would work, what would be a benefit, what would be kind of a hindrance to us. And right now we're comfortable to say we've got a pretty good process in place. And it is responsible. If it's something that there is no urgency, there is no immediate threat to life or other issues surrounded, we don't have an issue with, maybe having to draft a search warrant if it's appropriate, so.
Comparing it to a helicopter, these are pretty quiet, aren't they?
They're quiet and they're cheap. I mean, you're looking at helicopters in the thousands of dollars per hour, and then you've also got the pilots that are flying them. We have pilots that are flying ours, but you crash a $1 million helicopter, it hurts, and people get hurt. You crash a $30,000, $40,000 drone, it does hurt. We have had crashes with our drones, but it's minuscule in comparison. Your operating costs are basically recharging a battery compared to what it takes to run a helicopter or a plane. Yeah.
So what I was thinking of is, a helicopter can hover over a home, but one of these drones can come in quietly, and so the privacy issue becomes, I'm sure, where the legal
Yes, absolutely.
get involved in.
Yeah, because we can go up high enough that they're basically, we have line of sight because we know where the drone is. But unless you know where that drone is, it's almost like following an airplane or following a bird in the sky. You're eventually going to lose it. That same thing, we can go up and we can be set where unless they happen to maybe be looking at binoculars, they wouldn't be able to see it. But since we know exactly where that star is or where our drone is, we're able to keep an eye on it for line of sight. And when they get up high enough, they are silent. Up close, they make, I wouldn't say noise, they're not like a chopper, but you can hear the fan blades, when they're close. But you get up 100, 150 feet, and they more or less disappear into the sky. Yep.
Okay, there's a development in Florida where I think they need to fly over that development. I've heard there's a couple people with conflicts with one another.
We've got partners there. We can certainly work something out, yeah.
I appreciate the presentation. Very good, John. Thank you. Commissioner Coring?
Yeah, before the sheriff leaves, he just mentioned $30,000-$40,000. Just a question on that, Scott. I was at Costco the other day, and they're selling little miniature drones. One was like $400 and the other one was about $1,000. So why does ours cost $40,000? We could buy 30 of these from Costco, and if they fall and break or whatever, just throw it away and get another one. I mean, why is this one so spendy?
Yeah, well, and John can add whatever I leave out here, but when we look at the 4 drones we've got, 2 of them literally are sold at Costco. 2 of them are not sold at Costco. And the expense on them are truly the cameras. One of the cameras on them, I want to say is about $18,000, John? $12,000. So the cameras are really what's setting us apart, that technology where we can be literally miles away, and while we might not be able to read a license plate, we can at least zoom in and see what the person was doing. And that's where the technology comes into it, and that's where the cost comes into it. Also is the fact that, you look at, we have to have something that is reliable. And the small ones we've got, the great thing about them is they literally can be launched from our trunk. The bigger ones, and we always have an observer, and we always have the pilot, but the bigger ones are a little bit more setup maintenance, a little bit more time critical because of the fact that the motors come off, we have to set them up, we have to launch them. But we are getting what we're paying for them with the bigger ones. And the biggest expense is the cameras. And the infrared is the one thing that does cost money. Same thing, infrared, we've got infrared binoculars. You see them, for $500. That's not going to work for our line of work. What we need is something that has that true, where we could launch on Pelican Lake, and I feel comfortable in saying this, we could launch by the resort, by Breezy Point Resort on Pelican Lake, and if we had an overdue boater, within probably 10 to 15 minutes at night, using the infrared that we have, we'd be able to scan that whole lake and tell you if we have a boater out there or someone that's in distress. And that's capability that we have never had in the past. Even beyond, I would say, what some helicopters have, because we have helicopters that have FLIR capability, and we have others that do not have it. So, we're really, we're not just cutting edge. I mean, the technology that is being used for law enforcement is cutting edge in comparison to just a few years ago.
So another quick question then, the battery life, when you charge these up, is there a significant difference between the two? Less expensive, more expensive? And what is the battery life of those the charge when you send them up?
What's the runtime on them?
The runtime on a set of batteries for our big drones is about.
Yep.
So the runtime on our larger drones, and they're actually a ruggedized drone too, so we can fly them in colder temps, we can fly them in snow, and actually fly them in rain. I mean, it can't be like heavily downpour, but it could be raining at a pretty good clip, and we could still fly them. But normally it's right around 30 minutes. Depending on the temperature out. The batteries do have heaters in them as well, but we try not to fly much below 15 to 20 below if we have to, unless it's a life safety event. But from anywhere from 0 up, I mean, they're not an issue at all. And we have multiple sets of batteries, so we can continuously fly. And while we're charging, we can just swap out batteries, so there's no downtime for us when we're on scene.
They're smart enough that they'll gauge their own battery, and when they're getting low on the battery, they'll come back and land for us. And then we swap out the battery, we can send them right back up to that same exact location in the sky and have it sit there. I mean, it's amazing technology. Yeah.
Does wind impact the ability to put them up?
Yeah, it does. And it does impact battery life too if you have a 20, 30 mile an hour wind. We don't try to fly over 30 miles an hour wind, in 30 mile an hour wind. Our vendor says they've flown it up to 40 mile an hour wind, but that's really breezy, and you have that much equipment in the sky, I prefer not to.
Yep. All right. Any other questions, Commissioner
Question,
Old?
Mr. Chair. I think you answered one of my questions. You currently have 4?
Yes, we have 2 of them that are housed here at Brainerd at the fire hall, and we have 2 of them that are housed at the Cross Lake Fire Hall. And when we looked at the volunteers that came forward to be our pilots, we tried to incorporate that also of kind of where they lived or who they worked with for where they would respond to. So we truly have a north crew, if you will, and a south crew with the same technology, the same equipment. And they can both be launched. And it was just in the paper this last week, we've had, this year is no different. We've had snowbirds go through on Cross Lake. And the bigger drones that we do have the capability, they have a claw on them that we can remote operate it. And we've never done it in real life, but we will do it at one point. We've done it in training of literally bring a throwable, so your square cushion, your boat cushion that you sit on in the old canoe, where we carry that out there and can drop it in the hands of a person in the water. So my goal when we first started this program was exactly that. I wanted some capability when we've got that early ice and that late ice, when it's not safe early in the winter and when it's not safe as we approach spring. And we have people fall through the ice, which we have every year, where we'll be able to launch a drone and be able to bring them a life jacket, at least to keep them floating until we can get crews out there. And we just had the snowmobiles go through the last 2 weekends, I want to say, up on Cross Lake. We had them go through the ice up there. So,
That said, Sheriff, has there been discussion of expanding that 2 locations to maybe, other, police or fire departments, such that we kind of saturate the county with these things?
Yes, absolutely.
Just given the time to some of the, other locations, I'm sure it's pretty critical at some points, but your falling through the ice example would seem to be one that might be beneficial to have more of these locations. Is that something that's...
It's in the, yes, so we, excuse me, Commissioner, when we first started this program out, we wanted to be able to grasp how big we could make it and still manage it. And that's basically, we were looking at, how the initial training is intense because they're trained as pilots. They're not just trained as drone pilots, they're trained as a aircraft pilot. And they test as a aircraft pilot and they're licensed as an aircraft pilot. So we wanted to make sure that we could manage, number one, the team, but people that were going to be part of it were going to be devoted to doing it. And the feedback that we got was great. We are at the point now where we could comfortably say, and with numbers like this, where we're looking at 30 call-outs, so we're looking at, we're approaching 2.5, almost 3 calls per month, that we're dealing with. And how many more would we have if the availability was there? if we had one set up, say, in the Crosby Fire Department area or something over on the eastern edge of our county where we could have a response, we can see that coming. But they are expensive, and if Sourcewell ever does open up the availability of further resources or further funding, we'll look at it, absolutely. Sorry, I got a frog in my throat I just can't get rid of. Other questions? And we'd like to thank you for your support on this. You know, I remember the discussions we had. Some of you were here, some of you were not here, you know, going back in time when we first looked at this program. And it was a multi-year request, you know, for us as law enforcement, not just the sheriff's office, but us as law enforcement, working with Sourcewell to make this work. So we were thrilled to get this, and it's a great tool. It has done things that I never thought were possible. And, you know, we did get quite a bit of press coverage. We even, in fact, one of the, if they come out with a show, we were reached out by producers of one show that wanted copy of our footage where we did that rescue of the duck hunter this fall that fell out of the boat, and we were able to launch the drone down there. So, I mean, we are known as good pilots. And that pilot there works as a deputy. He actually had one of the small drones with him in his squad car. And was able to launch that immediately from the scene. So, you know, yes, at $1,000 each, $1,500 each for those smaller drones, like Commissioner Coring asked about, you know, the costs that we see. I could see the day where, I mean, maybe they'll be mounted on the roof of the squad and they'll literally launch remotely, and we'll be able to use them.
So your pilots, are they licensed regardless of the cost of these drones? If it's $1,000 one versus $30,000, they still have to be licensed equal?
Yep, they're licensed to fly a plane. Some of them, so I mean, so it's, and we had some that, it's not an easy test, and they had to do their homework, and they were very stressed out about being able to make it through. So, yeah, it's a commitment from them, too. Yep.
Cool. Well, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Appreciate it. Very interesting. Thank you. With that, we'll move on to the county attorney, Mr. Ryan.
Good morning, everybody. That's a pretty tough act to follow. I'm just wondering if those pilots will practice trying to catch big fish when they come down with that claw in the lake.
Well, that'll be the next.
I don't have anything. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair.
That'll be the next step, is to use a drone to find the fish. Instead of going underwater, we'll just fly over it.
Today, Mr. Chair, but I could answer any questions anybody may have of me.
Any questions of Attorney Ryan? Commissioner Coring?
Mr. Chairman, no questions for the county attorney. Thank you.
Looks like we're letting you off easy today, Mr. Ryan.
Appreciate it. Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you. County Administrator Houle. Senior Management Team report.
Yesterday, there was a senior management team report. Yeah, I would take it if could. That would be great. Thank you. There was a senior management team meeting yesterday. As with most senior management team meetings, we spend a lot of time talking about COVID impacts in our community. Right now, we're talking a lot about vaccinations. And I think I would like to have public health scheduled to come and talk to you at your next board meeting to just give you an update on where we're at with vaccinations. That is okay with the chair?
Yes.
So we talked about that, and rolling through, we have made significant progress, and we are not sitting on vaccinations. As soon as we get a dose of vaccines, we have the clinic scheduled, and they're gone within the week. And so that turnaround time, I'm pretty impressed with. I'm also impressed with our partners in the community, CRMC, Essentia, our local pharmacies that have been helping with our nursing homes in particular. Essentia, CRMC are now helping with vaccinations for school personnel. That's particularly important to the disruption in our community of keeping schools functioning normally. And so that is undergoing as we speak, and so we have really good partners locally. And so I think sometimes the stories that you hear around the nation, you worry maybe happening locally, and I'm pleased to stand here and tell you, no, that's not happening locally. So we talked a lot about vaccinations. We also talked about our PTO time. We are having an issue with many of our employees who are critical to our COVID mission or vaccination missions who are having a difficult time taking time off. And so we're seeing that those PTO banks are accruing up to the maximum. And then typically, if it goes over the maximum, you lose it. It's a tougher argument to make that because somebody is here doing our work for us and we can't really let them leave for a period of time, that they would lose some of their vacation time. So we're not sure what we're going to do with that, but that's an issue I think that's percolating we'll need to bring forward for your consideration at some point. We also talked about a performance review process. We are now done calibrating all of the performance reviews. You have 2 that are yet to be done, both Eric Flowers and mine. I believe that those are scheduled for March 9th, if I'm not mistaken.
We do have one update on that. We're going to do Eric at the end of February.
Oh, cool.
The last
Okay.
meeting. I think and then we'll do yours at the March 9th meeting.
Yep. I'm very pleased to report that we're right at our target percents. I think we're at 31.4% in the outperforming category. Our target is 30. So even in a COVID year, I'm particularly impressed with the managerial courage, the managerial discipline necessary to produce that during a year in which the disruptions have been so substantial. The disruptions are for everybody, but what we did not necessarily reward is if you're doing the same job, but you had to do it differently. We kind of think everybody was similarly situated in that regard. So we did focus on it had to have some kind of a significant impact on our response to COVID. So it wasn't as if COVID didn't enter into the equation. It is that the things that we all experienced associated with COVID did not enter into the equation. I'm also particularly pleased to say that the distribution between those of our leaders and those of our frontline contributing employees were on par. And that's an important yardstick for the integrity of the system. So I continue every year, I do crosstabs to look for problems in how we have done things. And so every year we start having conversations at the SMT. And if you don't have that be living, breathing dynamic with feedback back and forth, that system will get stale. And so you have to continually invest in keeping it up to date with the measures, and then also with the training for your supervisors and managers about what the performance expectations are. So I'm particularly pleased with how we did that. Last year, you asked us to get that process to be more compressed. And so I'm standing here on the 26th of January telling you we are largely complete. And so I hope that you're pleased. We were stretching into mid-March with most of it. And now what it's looking like is I might be the only one in March, and that's okay with me. We talked about business managers and having key performance indicators for business managers across the organization and being consistent. So, we have business managers at the Highway Department, Community Services, Sheriff's Office, Land Services. I'm probably forgetting someone. And we wanted to make sure that there are key performance indicators shared by all of those business managers. And how does that tie into central finance? So we had a lot of conversation about that. And then we did calibration of the SMT members' direct reports. And so calibration is sharing information about how you got to a particular performance rating for someone with your peers who are similarly situated, having to make the same kinds of decisions. Calibration is about equalization. Calibration is about equalization just like in the property tax system. Our goal isn't to be on market, our goal is to be equalized for everyone. And so here, that's particularly important, and we did that. And that's what we talked about yesterday. Happy to answer questions about that or anything else related to county government.
Questions from the board members? Commissioner Coring?
Mr. Chairman, no questions. Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to the citizen committee appointments. I have one appointment to make, and that's Teresa Mortensen to the CHS Advisory Committee from Commissioner Brecken. So I'll make that appointment. At this time, all the others are pending.
Mr. Chair, I would like to point out one thing. I have to stand corrected. The Community Corrections Advisory Committee is a statutory creation. And so it does require the full Board of Commissioners to appoint it. We could have moved that appointment to this portion of the agenda, but it would still have required a board motion. So I'm bringing it up to you because there were some conversations about, whether it was a board chair appointment or not, so that if you wish, it was on the consent calendar. I did not hear anybody utter the words, "We're pulling it." And so I do think you can consider that it did get board approval. I'm highlighting it so that you know that was an error on my part, and if you wish to reconsider. I'm not suggesting you should, just that you could.
I guess just from the chair's position, I'm not in favor of reconsidering that one at this time. I would like to hear from other board members if they'd like to see it as part of this process versus the consent agenda, but still requiring board action to approve. So if you'll let me know how you feel.
Well, Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
the only thing is it's, okay, so it's a statutory and it's a board approval. The board really didn't have any input into it, and I guess, maybe we should, in the future, we should maybe have a discussion about it. There was no discussion at all. It was just on the consent agenda. I don't, I think if we're going to be making the decision or the approval, I would think that we should have maybe a little discussion or a little input into it. Not that I need to on this one, but in the future, I think that'd probably be a good idea.
Okay, and, question, Mr. Hool, is what's the length of that appointment? Because I don't see that in the action that we took.
I'd have to go back and check the statute to make sure, because there is a statute. And so if there are term limits, it might be in there. Otherwise, if there are no term limits in the statute, then it would be up to you to set as in the form of bylaws.
Okay, and my concern is that we watch retirement dates and the term limits on that appointment, and that we try to bring those two together or anticipate that we're going to have a change, and to Commissioner Coring's point, that discussion takes place at the earliest possible point in time.
And your involvement in that process might ferret that out a little bit better. It would otherwise have been difficult for us, for instance, in the case of Corky, a couple of years ago when we appointed him, to know that this was going to be his retirement date unless he tells us that. So I think it's a challenging environment to try to synchronize those, but I think if you're asking the question, it's much more likely.
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Yes. Kara, go ahead.
Kara Terry again, Community Services. So I have the appointment terms right here. The member of the Corrections Advisory Board shall be appointed by the Board of Commissioners or the Joint Board in the case of multiple counties, and shall serve for terms of 2 years from and after the date of their appointment, and shall remain in office until their successors are duly appointed. So those are the term limits. Just a side note on the term limits, we often have board members who serve longer and some shorter. What we can commit to doing, not only to bringing it to the board for discussion, but is to bring it to the Community Corrections Advisory Board, because we have 2 representatives from the board on that advisory board to have a discussion too, to vet any candidates. And I apologize, we have a meeting tomorrow for the advisory board, I believe, and we should have done it that way rather than bring it directly to you guys. So we will strive to do better next time.
Very good. Thank you, Kara. So with that, there's one other additional piece of information that I have. Commissioner Coring, at our last meeting, you heard me talk about sending a letter to our legislators regarding the county being the proper place, in our opinion, to send dollars when we want to, if there's additional dollars that come out to assist our local businesses and nonprofits. That letter was sent out to each of you to review, and so this doesn't require, I don't think, board action, but I would just want to make sure that we're all endorsing that letter, that you had an opportunity to review. I have signed 3 copies, and they will be sent out after this meeting, but does anybody object to the letter as written? Hearing none, then we will send that out. Excuse me, Commissioner Coring?
Mr. Chair, I did review the letter. I think the letter is a good idea, and if you remember the discussion that we had, I think that reaching out, having the board chair on behalf of the board, reach out to our legislators on kind of more of on a regular basis and let them know what's happening here on the ground, whether it's the distribution of the, CARES Act dollars or if it's something else that's happening legislatively. I think we need to communicate that with our legislators. It's funny, after being a senator and now being on the county board, I really never realized the effects that a legislator in the voting that they're doing down at the Capitol does have a huge effect back home to their counties. And so unless we are proactive in talking to or sending a letter to our legislator, I just think it's a great idea. So, yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner Coring, and I would agree with you that I think there should be a more frequent communication with our legislative group. So, Administrator Houle.
Mr. Chair, in the past, what we have done, even the board chair has not been authorized to sign letters on behalf of the board. And so I do think a motion would be in order here to authorize the chair to send the letter. It's a question of, if you wish to speak on your own behalf as a district commissioner, we'll let you send whatever you want. If we're going to send it on behalf of Crow Wing County, on behalf of the Crow Wing County Board, generally speaking, we have gotten the full board's imprimatur on that. So I would suggest a motion.
And I appreciate that because all of our names do appear on that letterhead. So I would look for a motion to approve.
So moved.
Motion to approve.
Commissioner Hoag made the motion to approve. Commissioner Coring, are you okay with seconding the motion?
Second.
Thank you. Therese, if you would call the roll call, please.
Commissioner Hoag?
Aye.
Commissioner Franzine?
Aye.
Commissioner Coring?
Aye.
Commissioner Brecken?
Aye.
Commissioner Barrows?
Chair votes aye. Thank you, everyone, for that. I appreciate it. That motion does pass. And we'll look for additional opportunities, Commissioner Coring, to communicate with our legislative contingent in St. Paul. With that, if there's no other additional business, I would look for a motion to recess. Go ahead, Therese.
Mr. Chair, under the citizen committee appointments, Patrick Goldenik from the Natural Resources Advisory Committee has resigned. He's a professional appointment.
That's right.
And we need to figure out how we want to replace him, whether it be having the environmental services supervisor reach out to those agencies to see if there's someone that's willing to serve, or if you want to advertise. So I bring that.
Thank you for reminding me. Any preferences?
And I do have Ryan on the line if you want to talk to him.
Mr. Chair, Therese, can that professional position be filled by a retired professional that?
Ryan?
Yes, Mr. Chair, Commissioner Hoag. It says it needs to be a land resource professional in the bylaws. Our current representatives are Bill Faber, CLC Natural Resource Professor, and then Wade Miller, DNR Parks and Trails, and Christine Reese, DNR Wildlife. They're all current in their professions. I believe they would need to, have a current job, but I am not 100% sure if they could be a retired land resource professional.
With that, could you research that, Ryan? And my preference would be that you look to that group or somebody to bring to us so that we can make that appointment. Does that make sense?
I think that previously they've always been the ones who found the people, so.
If we are reaching out maybe to the retired folks, though, it might be better to advertise such that they know this position's even available. I just throw it out as maybe a helpful way of filling that.
I think what's happened in the past is like someone has moved on from their position, like in the DNR, and then like their successor takes over for them, correct, Ryan?
It's been a little bit of a challenge. We've had a logger in this role in the past, and then Pat is a procurement forester for SAPI, and it has been kind of a challenge to keep, to find folks. So, but I can do some research and solicit some folks and then, and follow up.
I
I'm
think-
just thinking that maybe the advertising might not be getting to the proper folks, you know, because it's, you advertise in the paper, and what are the chances that someone from the DNR or a logger or something is actually looking at that? You know, I mean, maybe they are.
It's just, how do we reach out to those folks if indeed
Right.
they are allowed to be a committee appointee? How
I
do we
kinda
get
forgot
that
about
word
the
out to them
logger.
is the challenge, I think.
Yeah.
But it just opens up the number of opportunities, I think, that,
And we certainly can advertise, that's why I brought it forward. How do you want to
my
proceed?
2 cents.
Well, could we wait and find out if it has to be a current
Yeah.
because,
I think
before
so.
we decide to advertise?
So Ryan, if you'll find out if we can look at retirees and/or current employees and let us know on that, and then we'll decide what the next course of action would be.
So do you want him to ask the committee? Is that what you're?
No.
Because that is in the bylaws, that's how it reads, how he read it, is that it's a, how did you say it? It's a how's it-
Land resource professional.
Land resource professional. So, I mean, it doesn't say retiree or current or any, that's how it's in the bylaws. So, and the bylaws are adopted by this board.
So it's not restricting it from anybody then.
It just says land resource professional.
We could get our county attorney's office to
Yes, let's.
Weigh in on that.
just verify, and then
Don, are you listening?
I was hoping you wouldn't notice. I'd have to look at the bylaws. I haven't seen them in quite a long time. So Ryan and I can touch base after today, and we'll go
Sure.
from there. If nothing else, we can always have the committee clarify what they mean by that. If it needs to be someone who is a professional and active, or a professional and/or retired.
Okay, but you'll review it with Ryan and then let us know so that we can determine the next bit of action.
Yep, I will. Ryan, you just want to email me that when you get a chance?
Yep, right away, I'll get you that.
Thanks.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Therese. And with that, I would look for a motion to recess and go into a closed meeting regarding labor negotiation strategy pursuant to Minnesota Statute 13D.03 subdivision 1B.
I make that
Mr. Chair,
motion.
before you do that,
Commissioner Coring.
yeah, Mr. Chair, just a question about process here. So we're going to go into labor negotiation strategy. I'm assuming we're going to talk about the LELS, and then we're going to come out of closed session and we're going to vote on the settlement agreement. Is that the way I'm reading the agenda?
No, we will be staying in closed session and take our action and then come out and report, correct? Mel is going to answer your question, Commissioner Coring.
Commissioner Corningen, Chairman, for closed session, we'll be reviewing our settlement for our community services contract. In open, then we'll go back into open session where I'll give you some of the details of that community services plan. In addition to that, we will talk about the LELS settlement agreement for the two groups that we've been talking about. Does that make sense?
Right, but we have to vote on the LELS settlement, don't we?
Correct.
Yes. Okay, that's all I had. I just want to make sure, I just want to make sure I'm voting on that.
Yes. So currently, I'm asking for a motion to go into closed session.
I made that motion.
Commissioner Franzine makes the motion. Second. Commissioner Hoag seconds that motion. Therese, if you would call the roll call, please.
Commissioner Franzine?
Aye.
Commissioner Coring?
Aye.
Commissioner Brecken?
Aye.
Commissioner Hoag?
Aye.
Commissioner Barrows?
Chair votes aye. Motion passes. We'll take a short recess and come back when Therese is set to go
Thank you.
and other pressures are addressed.
Therese, do you want me to stay on here, or do I have to come back in, or what are you going to do?
You can just stay right.
contract settlement that we have with our largest group here at the county. That is for our Teamsters Local 320 group. This represents about 175 employees in both our community services as well as our veteran services office. This group is 100% aligned to our performance-based pay plan with no changes in the upcoming years of the contract. Key recognition items for this group, we have settled on a rewrite of their LOA section to help really clean up some of that old language in the contract. In addition to that, we were able to do some more cleanup with this contract, big contract, that we were able to clean up old articles that no longer are effective for this group, whether it was severance pay or longevity pay. And then the last recognition item for this group was insurance. There's no changes to our health benefits for this group, but there is some pressure from Joint Council 32, which is the Teamsters Insurance, to potentially look at that in the near future, which we will certainly look at in after the next contract period, if that is something they want to entertain. So that is what I have to present for you today to settle that contract. And if you have any questions, I'll take those.
Any questions from any of the commissioners? Commissioner Coring, questions?
Mr. Chairman, no questions on this contract.
So I would look for a motion to approve the Teamsters 320 contract.
I'll make the motion.
Commissioner Hoag makes the motion to approve.
I'll second for discussion.
Commissioner Brecken seconds the motion for discussion. Commissioner Brecken?
Well, a question I have is that, Mel, you laid out what the numbers are and what could be focused in the future if with the Me Too movement.
Commissioner Brecken, this is only the contract for Teamsters 320, not
I'm sorry.
this issue.
I'm sorry. Okay, I apologize.
We'll get to that in a minute.
Yep.
So any questions regarding Teamsters 320 contract? Therese, if you would call the roll call, please.
Commissioner Brecken?
Aye.
Commissioner Hoag?
Aye.
Commissioner Franzine?
Aye.
Commissioner Coring?
Aye.
Commissioner Barrows?
Chair votes aye. That motion passes.
All right, I'll move forward and send you that for signature then.
All right, thank you. And if you will go to 12.1, which is the settlement agreement with LELS.
Sure, thank you, Chairman Barrows. Today, I want to bring forward our settlement agreement that we have with two of our law enforcement groups. This is between LELS deputies and LELS dispatch, which is our 911 officers. These are essential units here for the sheriff's office and for the county. This contract, the contracts cover a 3-year period from 2020 through 2022. The deputies are on, there was a contract language interpretation that our LELS partner had that was not in agreement with the county. They filed a few grievances over this. So the settlement offer that we have for this is the LELS has made the decision with our settlement offer to drop the grievances for both of the groups. They will also drop their interpretation of the holiday pay as we have discussed in previous meetings. If you want me to repeat that, I can certainly do that. In the sheriff's office, to help mitigate some of the cost associated with this, had made a decision to potentially change the shift lengths from a 10 or a 12-hour shift to an 8-hour shift. The sheriff's office has agreed not to implement an 8-hour schedule at this current time, and then we continue to maintain our rights over our scheduling as well as any of our shift bidding that happens in the sheriff's office. And then the last thing that we have agreed to is that the county should recognize Christmas Eve only as a full paid holiday instead of a half-a-day holiday. And just a little caveat to that, if an associate in these groups is not scheduled on a paid holiday, they are only paid 8 hours like they are today. Okay, and not, LELS's interpretation is if they were working on a holiday, they would be paid according to their shift bid, whether it's 10 hours or 12 hours. And if they were either working on a holiday or not working on a holiday. And that just was not something that we were able to agree to. So we agreed to changing our Christmas Eve holiday, which is normally a half-a-day holiday, to a full paid holiday for these two groups. I'll take any questions that you might have.
For clarification,
Yes.
if one of these individuals is working and is a 10 or 12-hour shift, are they receiving, in addition to that pay differential, 8 hours of comp time or?
Yes,
So they would.
Just
but
like
But it's
today,
8 hours,
yes.
not the 10 or 12.
they would receive whatever their shift would be for that holiday pay, just like they do today.
So they would receive 10 hours
Yeah,
or 12 hours.
that is correct.
And only the non-working ones would have the 8-hour.
Correct. Correct.
Okay. Any other questions, Commissioner Coring?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, to a question for Mel. So the way you explained it, at least the way I understand that it was explained last time, is we had an agreement with the parties involved, with the county, and we had an agreement, left the meeting believing we had an agreement, but somebody filed a grievance 2 months later, correct?
That is correct.
Well, I'm just gonna, I'm not gonna go into a big rampage here, even though I'd like to. I just don't agree with this at all. I mean, this is gonna open the floodgates, I think, for, if all the unions see this, they're gonna see this and go, well, my God, I wanna have all of our union people have the same thing. And I just, out in the rest of Crow Wing County, I can see getting Christmas Day as a paid holiday and Thanksgiving as a paid holiday, but we're expanding this. And now we're saying Christmas Eve is a full paid holiday. I don't agree with that at all. And, when if by chance all 500 employees, the unions negotiate this down the road, this is going to cost a hell of a lot of money. I think we talked about it like 800,000 plus. I'll tell you what, we're going to, be careful what you wish for, because we're either going to have to lay people off or we're going to have to raise taxes substantially, 2 to 3%, just for this portion alone, not only everything else that comes along with county government. So I don't agree with our lawyer that we had hired. She says, oh, I don't think you can win the arbitration. She doesn't know that. And I don't agree with that. I think you got to stand on principle. And as somebody that has an election certificate, I'm standing on principle and I'm voting no on this. We could go to arbitration and we could win this. So I implore the rest of the board members to vote with me, but I think we need to vote no on this.
Thank you, Commissioner Coring. And following up on his question, and realizing that a union can file a grievance at any point in time when they disagree with an article or one of the pieces of an article. So Mel, do you feel that with these other contracts that currently don't address that, is there language that could be interpreted similarly to what the LELS contract had and caused this grievance to come forward?
We actually have another contract in our sheriff's office. Our licensed sergeants have similar language, and how we have practiced this, except for the Christmas Eve holiday, but how we would practice if you're working on a holiday versus where you're not working on a holiday. So we've had a long-standing practice in our licensed sergeant group already with that, except for the Christmas Eve. Theirs is still a half-day holiday.
So I'm not sure of your answer to my question. Question is there language in these other contracts?
No.
Similar to what has been in the signed contract with LELS for Local 13 and 14, that they could come with a grievance and put us in a similar position, or is the language such that they'll have to wait until there's another negotiation?
They'll have to wait until there's another negotiation.
Okay, thank you. Other questions?
Well, Mr. Chair, I mean, the decision we make today obviously affects our negotiations into the future. If we approve this today, are we just kicking the can down the road and eventually having to pay the consequences anyway?
The answer to that is potentially yes. And it'll depend on, if you remember, Commissioner Brecken, at the last meeting that we had concerning this, I mentioned that in the negotiating process, if that issue is brought forward, we have to be very adamant that Loco is going to give up something to get that. There's a price to pay on both sides for negotiating a contract. And how firm you want to be determines how firm they want to be. So their tool, in the end, is a strike. That's the bottom line. So that's the issue that we're dealing with. Sheriff Goddard, did you want to speak?
Yeah. So, Mr. Chair, Commissioners, my apologies. I was not able to make it to the last meeting where the discussion points were made on that. I am never for a loss of words, but with this, I'm going to temper them partially through Mr. Houle to fill in the blanks for me. Do I see this as a good outcome? Yes. And it is my office, and it is my schedule. And the decisions made here today by you could have direct reflection on something that I control, my schedule. I am in favor of this moving forward, and I'm going to reserve my comments there. If any of you want to reach out to me and have conversations on a personal level, I will certainly share more in depth my feelings on this, but I am in favor of this moving forward. This is something that has hit our office very hard, and it was not interpreted. It was never brought on the table. I can say that confidently when we were in negotiations. But it has hit a lot of our employees very personally, because what we're talking about here, is scheduling, is their lives, and when they're going to work and when they have time off, daycare, everything that kind of plays into it. I can't make you vote one way or the other, but my vote for this, if I had a say, my vote would, yes, this is a means to an end that will be beneficial. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Sheriff.
Thank you.
Before you leave, any questions for Sheriff Goddard? Commissioner Coring?
No questions. And I understand where Scott's coming from, and I can sympathize with him. But I guess I'm trying to look into the future, concerned about the budgets of moving forward. I could just look at this year's budget, not worry about, next year or the next year. But I think this is going to have a dramatic effect down the road on the county's budget, which could have an effect of us having to lay people off, or we're going to have to raise taxes substantially to pay for this if all the other unions demand this. I believe that.
And I will say, Commissioner Coring, knowing about negotiations, there are ways to address the financial side of it that would mitigate some of those costs going forward. It'll be a tough negotiation, but I think there are avenues to address it. Commissioner Franzine.
I just have a question for Mel. How many people does this contract cover?
We have 38 deputies as well as 12 dispatchers, I believe,
So 50. And how many people does the county employ?
485.
So we have 435 more people who are going to expect this.
Potentially. Commissioner
It doesn't sound good.
Well,
to-
480, that includes our non-contracted employees as well.
Your point is well taken.
Yep.
And Sheriff, thank you for your remarks. Appreciate it. Any other questions? So with that, I think we're looking, go ahead, Mel.
So, go ahead, you go ahead.
I was going to say if there's no other questions, we're looking for a motion on this settlement, correct?
Correct, and I would, my ask would, if you were authorizing me to sign the settlement agreements, I can execute that right after the board meeting. Our LELS has sent me their signed version of the contract, or the settlement agreements.
So with that, I would look for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to, piggytail a little bit off of Bill's comment that we potentially could be kicking the can down the road a bit here. But by moving forward with this, I think it allows us to better plan and put together strategies for these potential Me Too agreements that may come in front of us, rather than kind of just rolling the dice and assuming we're going to win. I don't know that I'm comfortable with that. With that, I would go ahead and make the motion to approve.
Commissioner Hoag makes the motion to approve. Looking for a second.
I'll second.
Commissioner Brecken seconds the motion. Therese, if you would call the roll call, please.
Commissioner Hoag?
Aye.
Commissioner Franzine?
No.
Commissioner Coring?
No.
Commissioner Brecken?
Aye.
Commissioner Barrows?
Chair votes aye. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Anything else, Mel?
That is it for today.
I would look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Commissioner Franzine makes the motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Second by Commissioner Brecken. Therese, if you would make that final roll call, please.
Commissioner Franzine?
Aye.
Commissioner Coring?
Aye.
Commissioner Brecken?
Aye.
Commissioner Hoag?
Aye.
Commissioner Barrows?
Chair votes aye. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Commissioner Coring, you should appreciate the weather down there because it's a lot different up here.